guys.
Thank you. Before we begin the presentation, I kind of wanted to do a small exercise that we do sometimes before we give this type of presentations about the immigration movement. And the exercise is about moving. So you guys can raise your hand if this applies to you. Have you ever moved from one continent to another continent? So just raise your hand. Have you ever moved from one country to another country? Have you ever moved from one city to another city? Have you ever moved from one neighborhood to another neighborhood? And have you ever moved from one house to another house? All right. And have you ever moved from one room to another room? And everybody's hands should be up, right? We do this exercise just so we can all see that at one point or another, human beings move. We're always continuously moving. And we have many reasons to do that move. But now that we're going to be talking about social movements, I also want to acknowledge that we don't just move physically, we also move socially. And it's really important to realize that when we're talking about social movements, because we're always a society moving forward. Okay? And I'll give it to Tony Nelson, he's going to be talking about some of the programs that we have at Mexico Solidarity Network, and then I'll be speaking about the immigration movement that I've been part of.
Thanks. Hello, everyone. It's nice to be back here again. My name is Tony, as was mentioned, and I work with the Mexico Solidarity Network with Antonio. And I want to start out a bit general and then go more specific to a very unique way that we go about thinking about moving in the world. But before so, I want to mention something that's really important as we're going on this tour. There are a lot of events going on within Mexico and around the world in support of the communities that had 43 students disappeared from them on September 26th. 43 students were disappeared. They have still not been found. And so we're just putting this out here not to just start everything out really heavy, but because it would be very unjust for us not to mention this very serious act that is most likely involve a number of levels of government in collusion with organized crime in Mexico. And for this to kind of be put on your radar, that this is going to be an event, like some of you are familiar with the events of Acteal in 1997, when a community was attacked by paramilitary forces in Chiapas. This was this moment where it brought a lot of attention to Mexico, and we believe this is also going to be one of those moments that shines a light on some of the worst effects of brutal state repression because of the forces that are acting upon it. So I just wanted to mention that. But for us as an organization, the way that we work and the way we go about things is really important. We don't think that it's enough that people just want justice. And we don't think that people should just go about doing justice however they see fit. We think that people should do justice in ways that actually build community and that work against and deconstruct systems of oppression that are affecting a lot of our friends and our families' lives. So it matters how we go about fighting for justice. And the way we go about fighting for justice in our organization is from below and to the left. This is a lema, this is a phrase, but that's also a political philosophy that we've learned from the Zapatista movement when they say, desde abajo y a la izquierda. For this, this to be interpreted in our own context and where we're working in the Centro Autónomo of Albany Park, from below, what that means that we believe in building people power, and we don't believe in waiting for systemic change to happen from above. We think that we have to organize, we have to build the democracies that we need, because whatever promises are made in electoral campaigns, they're very rarely ever fulfilled. And so we have to build those structures from the ground up. It also means that we don't believe in organizing for people or to people. We don't see people as turnout numbers. We don't see them as objects to be organized. We see people as compañeros and compañeras to struggle alongside of. To the left means that we as an organization have a very serious critique of the global system of capitalism. We believe that that system is oppressive at its roots, and it's not something that is just once in a while too greedy or passes the line, but instead it depends on exploitation, and we see this happening in terms of consistent threats of indigenous people's lands, of campesinos' lands, in the pursuit of copywriting seeds or in the pursuit of mining rights. So we as an organization take this seriously because the folks that we work with in Mexico have a big problem with the way that capitalism is affecting them in their communities. So one of the ways that our organization goes about doing solidarity is through a very unique social movements-focused study abroad program where we bring university students as well as non-students down to Mexico to study with the movements that have been organizing along these lines, from below and to the left. Sorry. We don't like the term service learning for what we do, because there's no mistaking when we go down to learn from these social movements that there's very little one can do when you're not from a place. There's very little one can offer when you don't know the context, political, social, and linguistic. And so when we go to do learning, and we start that in Chiapas with the Zapatista movement. We spend 6 weeks there learning about their history, their political context, their struggle, in their language school that they've opened for people to come and learn about them in that way. But you learn language, you can learn Spanish, or you can take tzotzil classes if you already speak Spanish, in a very different way than you might in a university. You're learning a language and a different way of seeing history, and a different way of seeing the world. After we go to Chiapas, we move on to Tlaxcala. It's the smallest state in Mexico, but it has a very, very proud movement of campesinos and urban movements inside of Apizaco. And with this organization, the Consejo Nacional Urbano y Campesino, CENUC, we learn what campesino families are doing to fight against the constant threats of Coca-Cola and Monsanto for their lands and their seeds. And we live with families that have been dealing with what it is to have family members that were forced to migrate to Canada or the United States to work. And then we finished the semester-long study abroad program in Mexico City for the last month. And in Mexico City, we work with the Frente Popular Francisco Villa Independiente. They're also known as the Panchos. And the Panchos have an incredibly powerful movement in one of the most populous cities in the world, where they fight for dignified lives and dignified homes. They have 9 autonomous communities. They don't let police or military inside those communities. They have their own security commissions of each of those communities. And we live inside of one of those communities and see what it is for a community to organize and build life projects. They have a soccer field. They have a parque para jubilados, a park for exercise for the elderly. They have built a greenhouse. And these are the kinds of projects that they do inside of their community, working through block brigades. In the community that we live in, there are 5,000 people living there. And so this is yet another example of a social movement in Mexico that we believe we have a lot to learn from. And so we go down there, again, with the purpose of learning from them and bringing those lessons back to the United States and our communities to figure out how we can organize along similar lines. If you're interested in any of these programs, come on up and talk to us afterwards. I must mention, before I turn it back over to Antonio, that we also have a newly approved program in Cuba that along the same lines. Our study abroad programs were not invented because folks believed in study abroad per se. They were based out of political solidarity work being done much before we had these programs. And the same thing with Cuba. One of our compañeros, Tomás, he has been doing political solidarity work in Cuba mainly through the Martin Luther King Center in Havana, Cuba. And that's a popular education center that's recognized worldwide for their trainings in popular education and community organizing. And so students base their studies for a semester out of that community center, with families doing community organizing inside of Havana. They live with host families as well, which is also a unique aspect about our program in Cuba. And so this is a very new option for students to study in a very different way inside of Cuba as well. So these are the programs that actually we believe in building solidarity through learning and bringing these things back to the United States and the communities that people are from here. And so that's actually how we cross the borders regularly to bring these kinds of learnings back to the Centro, where both of us are based when we're not abroad. And so I'm going to turn it back over to Antonio to talk about his work with both us as well as before coming to us to work on our staff. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Tony. Hi, my name is Antonio Gutierrez, and I'm undocumented. I came to the United States in 2000 with my mom and my younger sister to reunite with my dad. And my story is a story out of one of 12 million stories that are of the undocumented boys in population here in America. I came here looking for a better life, looking to educate myself, to go to college, to better myself, and to hopefully at one point help my family do better too. I went to school here, went to middle school, and learning English was really hard, but I went through it. I went to high school, and then I eventually went to university with full ride tuition, which was great. But then as soon as I graduated, I found out that me being undocumented was something that I had always never, I knew that I was undocumented, but I never really talked about it. It was something that we never discussed on the dinner table at home. It was something that was very taboo, that my parents told me never to tell anybody, because we ran risk of deportation, of separating our families. So it was something that I never told to my closest friends, my partners. They never found out. It wasn't until I graduated and I was working in an architecture firm, because I went to school for architecture. And then my employer, after a year working there, she found out that I was undocumented through just a little new payroll company. And so she found out. I had to come out clean to her, and I told her what happened and that I was really sorry that I had lied to her about my legal status here as an immigrant. She completely understood, but also she couldn't do anything. She had to let me go, and that's when I realized that if I wanted real change to happen, that I needed to do it for myself, that I couldn't really rely on other people to be organizing my community, and that I was just going to benefit from whatever work they were doing. So I came to the Immigrant Youth Justice League, which is a Chicago-based organization formed in 2009. It's an undocumented-led organization, mostly youth, which we believe that we are undocumented, unafraid, and unapologetic. And this is one of the flyers from one of the Coming Out of the Shadows event, where we empower community to say that we are undocumented and that we're no longer afraid to hide, that we're not going to hide anymore, because we know that by showing ourselves and telling people our stories, that that's the only way that we're going to be able to change this social oppressive system that is keeping us silent and that is keeping my community oppressed and is deporting them. After coming out to Ayo, I organized with them. I'm still part of it for 2.5 years now. And I really came to understand the power that it has to own out to myself about being undocumented. And I went through something very similar when I was 16, and I wanted to tell my friends that I'm also gay. So when I came out to them and they accepted me, it was so empowering. And the same thing happened after I was 22. When I came out as undocumented, the same thing happened, where I got empowered with the same people that I came out with, and then eventually be able to tell my partners, be able to tell just on the first day and bring it up on the table and say, I'm undocumented, and this is kind of like what I have to go through, and this is still something that I'm working on. Ayo has worked on many things. From the beginning, since 2009, we worked on the DREAM Act, very legislative work, and then after the DREAM Act fell in the Senate, we really got discouraged, but we didn't stop. We kept working, putting pressure to the politicians, because that's the way we see it. We see politicians as a tool that we need to push and put pressure on, but not the only way to organize. We see more organizing from what Tony was saying, more from below to the left, where we organize a community, and it's through that community organizing that we can really create social change. And we do this by different things, from direct actions, like civil disobedience, and also the Coming Out of the Shadows event that we do every March. After receiving DACA, or Deferred Action for Early Childhood Arrivals, which most of the people in Ayo were able to acquire it, including myself, we saw that there was something else in our community that the immigration was focusing on. after President Obama came into as the president, his administration started deporting many immigrants than any other administration before, prior to that. And we saw that every single person that we knew in our community was being affected by it. Now there's 2 million deportations, and I have not come to know anybody in the immigrant community that doesn't been directly affected by it, including myself, where my cousin got deported about a year ago. So we started organizing around that, and we became part of this national campaign called Not One More from Enderlin, and we started doing civil disobedience around that. First as the youth in the front, and then eventually as a collaborative with other organizations that we never had worked before, and for the first time we were doing direct actions with people that were not just necessarily youth, but other immigrant community in the undocumented population. And then that's when we started building OCAD, which is Organized Communities Against Deportation, another group that Ayo helped form in undocumented Illinois, which is now this coalition of these other undocumented-led organizations in Chicago and in the state of Illinois and even Wisconsin, where we all come together and share resources to help organize our communities in our respective neighborhoods or locations, and therefore moving forward to create this change through community organizing. Some of the direct actions that we have done are march. We've done civil disobedience, as you can see there in this picture on the bottom. We're actually stopping a bus that is leaving a detention center, taking some of the immigrants to the airport so they can be deported. And we did this in November, and it doesn't look that cold right there, but it was almost negative, like temperature, but everybody was amazing, and people, you can even see the people, but there were people chained up to the tires. And it was a great action that it was great to see other community come together. And for the first time, we had a variety of ages going from 21 all the way to almost 60 years old of the people that got arrested during that action. And then over here, we have a march where we actually, we walked 25 miles from ICE headquarters, downtown Chicago, all the way to the detention center in Broadview, Illinois. And we did this over in 2 days. And it was just great that at one point or another we got maybe to 200 people, and then people started, but we never fell below 50 people. And then eventually people were just coming in and out, and it was a great experience. And I was able to do the walk, and I'm really happy that I did it. We also done other actions where we go to DC, and we collaborate with other organizations such as Enderlin, which is a national organization, and we done some of the actions there. This is in Arizona. And then that's here in Illinois. And so the Enderlin page is enderlin.org. If you guys want to learn more about this anti-deportation work that they're doing at a national campaign. And the notonemoredeportation.com, which it has a lot of the petitions of the people that are fighting their deportations. And now I want to talk a little bit, a lot of the questions I get asked is, if you were so invested in the immigration movement, which I still am because I'm still part of Ayo, now I'm the housing organizer at Centro Autonomo, and people always ask, why did you make that change? How can you go from an immigration movement or an immigration organizer to a housing organizer? How does that happen? And the reason is because I love my community, because I see oppression happening, not just in the immigration movement, but anywhere in our society. So when I came to Centro Autonomo, having my architectural background, I wanted to keep organizing after I had the opportunity to be able to work again, but I also didn't see myself just going back to the architectural firm that I was working before. I was a new person after 2 years of organizing and learning from my community, and I wanted to keep doing that. I wanted to keep working with my community. So I came to Centro Autonomo, where we have an adult high school program, ESL classes, the housing movement, Zumba, and I really fell in love with it. It's amazing how the people that really love, that come through Centro, they love it, and we as the staff, we don't see each other separate from them, but we're working together to kind of move forward. And then these are some of the actions that I helped organize as far as the housing movement at Centro Autonomo with Casas del Pueblo, where we fight for dignified housing, as housing is a human right, and we're helping people in foreclosures and going through evictions. And then I'll give it back to Tony, and then hopefully we'll have some time for questions.
So one of the ways that the Centro we try and incorporate a lot of different aspects that relate to community needs is that we developed a master's program with the University of Wisconsin-Milwaukee where people get their master's degrees in popular education and community organizing, but based at our Centro Autonomo in Albany Park. And so folks that are interested in community organizing and popular education come to our Centro, they take classes while there, but for us, without practice, theory means nothing. And so the point of the classes is that these master's students for 2 years at least will come, and while they're getting their degree and taking formal classes, learning the theories behind popular education and community organizing, that they pour themselves into the programs at the Centro Autonomo, like the housing movement, or our adult high school, or developing new programs that we haven't had the capacity to kind of develop before then. There's a lot of needs in our community. There's a lot of things that we would love to work on. A lot of times in our presentations, people are like, why don't you do this? And then I usually say, like, why don't you come and do that with us? I don't know how to do that. So it's the most amazing thing about the Centro, for me, having worked there as well, is that it's radically open for anyone who wants to take seriously this notion of long-term community organizing. That is, not treating things as, not just treating the symptoms of kind of what are the ailments of society's injustices, but how do we develop and build relationships that can stand the test of time and become communities that will be able to resist and fight against these things we know that are coming down the road. Another economic collapse, more ecological catastrophes. We know that these are going to take a disproportionate toll on marginalized communities. And so how are we going to have the relationships that are strong enough to withstand these things that are coming our way if we go about traditional organizing where you treat people as, as turnout numbers or as a service or a client or someone who you're just merely helping in the moment? We have to stop thinking of only in terms of Band-Aid solutions and think about more longer term. So the master's program, again, is another idea that's been generated out of this space of trying to figure out how to do education in a mutual, collaboratory way and not a top-down way. Maybe we can finish on this and go to questions. And these are some ideas we put together as kind of an intentional way of pushing the envelope. We like to be antagonistic. We believe in popular education and not training. Are folks familiar with what popular education is? It's a method of, it's definitely not a method. It's a way of thinking about education that resists techniques or the ideas of the ideas that people learn by having things planted into their brains. Instead, the idea is that every person is a dignified human that interprets their world, and you have to start with that mutual respect and dignity. Every human has that. Once you start from there, the learning process should be entered into collaboratively and willingly by each person. That we're all teachers and students at the same time. And that people should be able to direct their learning processes. And like Howard Zinn said that you can't be neutral on a moving train, we believe that any education that pretends to be neutral is serving whatever the status quo is, whatever the mainstream interests are. And so we want education that is liberatory, that actually frees us and is democratic. We believe in compañerismo, not charity. If folks are looking to give or receive charity at the Centro, it doesn't last very long. We try and encourage a different kind of relationship. We say, if you want to work on something together, let's build, let's walk. But if you're interested in coming to do charity work, I think you might want to look elsewhere. We're interested in long and not short-term strategies, and solidarity, not service. So these are just some, again, it's not an absolute.
Guys.
Thank you. Before we begin the presentation, I kind of wanted to do a small exercise that we do sometimes before we give this type of presentations about the immigration movement. And the exercise is about moving. So you guys can raise your hand if this applies to you. Have you ever moved from one continent to another continent? So just raise your hand. Have you ever moved from one country to another country? Have you ever moved from one city to another city? Have you ever moved from one neighborhood to another neighborhood? And have you ever moved from one house to another house? At the immigration movement that I've been part of.
Thanks. Hello, everyone. It's nice to be back here again. My name is Tony, as was mentioned, and I work with the Mexico Solidarity Network with Antonio. And I want to start out a bit general and then go more specific to a very unique way that we go about thinking about moving in the world. But before so, I want to mention something that's really important as we're going on this tour. There are a lot of events going on within Mexico and around the world in support of the communities that had 43 students disappeared from them in September 26th, 43.
All right. And have you ever moved from one room to another room? And everybody's hands should be up, right? We do this exercise just so we can all see that at one point or another, human beings move. We're always continuously moving. And we have many reasons to do that move. But now that we're going to be talking about social movements, I also want to acknowledge that we don't just move physically, we also move socially. And it's really important to realize that when we're talking about social movements, because we're always a society moving forward. Okay? And I'll give it to Tony Nelson, he's going to be talking about some of the programs that we have at Mexico Solidarity Network, and then I'll be speaking about...
Because of the forces that are acting upon it. So I just wanted to mention that. But for us as an organization, the way that we work and the way we go about things is really important. We don't think that it's enough that people just want justice. And we don't think that people should just go about doing justice however they see fit. We think that people should do justice in ways that actually build community and that work against and deconstruct systems of oppression that are affecting a lot of our friends and our families' lives. So it matters how we go about fighting for justice. And the way we go about fighting for justice in our organization is from below and to the left. This is a lema. This is students who disappeared. They have still not been found. And so we're just putting this out here not to just start everything out really heavy, but because it would be very unjust for us not to mention this very serious act that is most likely involve a number of levels of government in collusion with organized crime in Mexico. And for this to kind of be put on your radar, that this is going to be an event, like some of you are familiar with the events of Acteal in 1997, when a community was attacked by paramilitary forces in Chiapas. This was this moment where it brought a lot of attention to Mexico, and we believe this is also going to be one of those moments that shines a light on some of the worst effects of brutal state repression